In this video we're going to talk about the base settings. We're not going to cover all of the settings because that's for the more intensive administrators course. Remember, this is an introductory course to the default solution. When we deploy the default solution, we will have defined these settings and essentially it will be determined to a degree by the awards that we have configured for you. So again, remember, I'm now looking at the settings menu. Only your account administrators have access to the settings menu, but it's not a bad idea to understand, even if you're a recruiter or manager role, I still think there's benefit in understanding the base setup and some of the logic behind it. So when we're setting up the base setup, the first thing we set up is our timesheet settings. And this is an example of our timesheet settings. So you can see here we've got a timesheet setting for nurses. The main settings here is that it's job specific, so you need to have for every award that we are going to be processing for your business, we will have a timesheet setting for that award. That's where we specify that it's job specific. We then decide which of the awards are we attaching to the setting and which of the rule sets. Now, think rule sets are what we call a variation. So you might be providing nurses to a number of different customers based on the nurse's award, but there may be slight variations depending on the customer. So you need to have a timesheet setting for each variation. So you may have a variation. This example is a straight one-to-one match, but you could have a variation where some customers don't pay a particular allowance, so therefore you have a variation to capture that. That's what we mean by the rule set. And at the moment, these rule timesheet settings will be created by your Recruit Complete consultant. However, it is intended when we release the administrators course that we will then teach those administrators how to take control of this function themselves. Likewise, you can see that we've got a shift assessment on this timesheet setting. Don't concern yourself with that for the moment. That's a really powerful piece of functionality which enables you to ask questions when a contractor is submitting their timesheet. Questions can be things about how they felt about the shift, about their manager, but also questions about maybe are they claiming tool allowance, are they claiming meals, those sorts of claimable allowances which might not necessarily be able to be determined directly from the nurse's award interpretation. So there's the timesheet setting. As I said, these will be set up for you. Little feature down here says that you can enter timesheets in 5-minute increments or 15 increments depending on the timesheet setting here, because when we create a job, and we're going to say we create a job to provide 3 nurses to Alliance Health, we will say in that job which timesheet setting is going to apply. And that'll be determined by the award that we want to process. So this is your timesheet setting. Now the balance of the settings, however, can definitely be configured by your administrator. The first one we need to specify for our default solution is your public holiday groups. So you need to have a public holiday group for each area which has different public holidays. So of course Brisbane, we know that Brisbane has ECA. Therefore, we need to have a separate group for Brisbane than we would have for New South Wales, Sydney, Adelaide, etc. So you can see here that we have a public holiday group, and then we create for each of the public holidays, for each of the years, we create when those public holidays are going to fall due. So you can see here that we've created the ECA public holiday for 21, 22 and 23. And that's important again because we're going to say, when we create our customers, we're going to say what public holiday groups are relevant for these customers. Then when we add a job for that customer that potentially is going to schedule workers over public holidays, we need to say for that job which public holiday group will we be processing under. And it's important you can cater for that because you will often have customers in different public holiday areas, and therefore you need to have your various public holiday groups. So that's public holiday groups. Process period groups are synonymous with pay frequencies. So this is the pay frequencies that you're going to pay your contractors on. So you can see here that we've got a pay frequency here, weekly, Monday to Sunday paid Wednesday. It's a 7-day cycle commencing on the 5th of July. That's a Monday. So every 7 days that'll cycle around on a Monday. But you may have other contractors that you pay a different frequency, Tuesday to Monday paid Wednesday. There are simply no restrictions on the different frequencies that you want to create. You can create as many as you want. Here is an example of a fortnightly frequency. And again, when you create your customers, you will say which pay frequencies are you going to be paying contractors for when you apply them or schedule them to work for that customer. So there's our public holiday groups, our process period groups. The next thing we set up is in our finance menu, we then set up our invoice period groups. Invoice period groups are the frequency upon which we will invoice our customers. So you can see here that we got different cycles, different lengths, different start dates. Just to let you know, when you do add a monthly one, even though you have 31 days, the system will be clever enough to identify February on 28 days and also leap year, and also those months with 30 days. So just always make sure that when you're creating your monthly invoice period group, that you're doing so with a 31-day cycle. And of course you can add more. Simply go add, and you can give it a name, a code, number of days in the cycle, and a start date, and it will cycle the number of days from that start date. So you could have 3 weekly invoicing if you wanted to. Simply there are no restrictions. We also need to specify the payment terms. So payment terms are again something that we'll assign to the customer. I'm going to show you that in a moment. But for example, you may have different payment terms for different customers. One customer may be 14 days from invoice, 7 days from invoice, 20th of the month following, 30th of the month following. Again, you create them as you need. So again, give it a name, give it a type, and give it a value. And the value is then applied according to the type that you specify. So that's what we call the payment terms. We also specify your bank branches, only for Australia though. So in Australia, we have a database of every bank branch, and you can see there's 1,400 pages of every bank branch in the country. And then when you have a validated list of bank branches. So when we then update our candidate records and we capture the bank account for paying their wages into, we will be selecting from a validated branch. Now the reason, even though we create this default library for you when we first deploy the solution, from time to time a new branch may open. Maybe there's a branch that's not in the library that we've provided, so you can add your own branches as you see fit here. Bank branches are exactly the same as with super funds. Here we have a library of the superannuation funds available. The difference here, you have self-managed funds and you have regulated funds, and you can add additional funds as required. So self-managed funds, for example, you're going to have to add them because we have no idea of all the self-managed funds that may be available. So again, when you add a super fund, you give it a name, then you give it a type, and then depending on the type, you might be asked additional information. So then you've got a validated list of superannuation funds, and then you can attach them to your candidates as you see fit. So those are the settings that come with the base that you, as a minimum, you need. And if you have these settings, you've got enough to be able to create jobs, interpret those jobs according to the timesheet settings, generate invoices on the frequency required, make sure the public holidays are processed for the right schedules in the right areas. It's all available to you once you've set up the settings as we've defined here. But just to show you how you might use those, if we now pop across and have a look at our customers. So let's have a look at a customer. Alliance Health. If we go to the finance page, we can see the process period group. Now, this is a pay frequencies. So in this example, potentially when we put labourers or contractors or workers into this customer, they may be paid one of 2 different pay frequencies. So you're not limited to a single pay frequency for one customer. You can have multiple pay frequencies for the customer. Then when you create the job, you select which of the pay frequencies will be applied to that job. Likewise with public holiday groups, you can specify multiple public holiday groups. Again, when you create the job for your customer, you'll select one of these two public holiday groups. You can also have multiple pay frequencies, invoice frequencies. Some jobs you might want to bill weekly, some monthly. Simply, there are no restrictions. And finally, the payment terms that are going to apply to this customer. So that means that this customer must always pay their invoices on the 20th of the month following. And then when we generate the invoices, it looks at the payment terms for that customer. It looks at the invoice date and generates the right payment date onto your invoice. So that's how we use those settings against the customer, and then we ultimately apply them to the job. Likewise, when we're managing our contacts, if we come in and have a look at our contractor, for example, we edit their record. There is a section in their edit profile where we can maintain their bank accounts and super funds. So again, if we come down here, if I want to add a bank account, I select from my validated list of bank accounts. So this is where we're using the bank account settings. Likewise, I add their super fund, and this is where I can select the super fund and capture the detail and attach the right super fund to the contractor. So those are the base settings required. We've still got a little bit more work to do before we're ready to have a configured solution, but we'll cover that in the next video. Thank you very much.